Welcome to CDP's podcast, Practical for Your Practice,
where we give you actionable intel to support what you do, one colleague to another.
Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Practical for Your Practice. I'm Dr. Kevin Holloway, one of the hosts for today, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Dr. Jenna Ermold. Hello, Jenna.
Hello, Kevin.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. This is going to air after, but this is Memorial Day week that we're recording this, and I feel like this is the longest week in history for some reason.
Right? The shortest ones always feel longer.
I know.
Yeah.
I just was thinking, what day is it today? It's Thursday, and then I realized, no, it's not. It's only Wednesday. So, anyway.
Then ruins a good Thursday, like we're realizing it's Wednesday.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Well, on the theme of Memorial Day-ish, I guess, we have with us today some fantastic guests who are currently serving active duty in the military. In fact, they are graduate students in the Medical and Clinical Psychology program at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, where CDP is located as well. So join me welcoming John Ray Roberts and Annie McConnon. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So tell us a little bit about yourselves. Let's start with John Ray. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, maybe like what brings you here.
Yeah, sure. So, as you already mentioned, I am First Lieutenant John Ray Roberts. I go by John Ray because please don't call me First Lieutenant. That's my father's name, as I told you. I am a second year, well, I guess now rising third year. We just finished the second year officially.
That's right.
The academic school year is over. So it's weird to, be in that transition, but rising third year student in our clinical psychology program at USU. And, both of us, and Annie will probably miss this too, but we are both in Andrew Waters' lab. It's a laboratory of cognitive interventions. But we are specifically studying artificial intelligence and expertise in all areas, which is what we'll get into today. But do you want me to share kind of how I got here and kind of what that journey has looked like? Yeah, sure. So before this, I've had a little bit of an unorthodox journey, so I won't take too long because I could talk all day about it. But I actually started my career in the military, at least as a chaplain. I was a chaplain for 7 years in the Army Reserves, and was chaplain candidate before that for 4 years. It's been a long time doing that work, but on the civilian side, had been working in academic work for a long time. So after I went to get my master's divinity for being a chaplain, started working as doing a lot of research in different parts of just higher education, and was looking at a lot of different things, but started a clinical counseling program at Radford University. And, in that process, I actually, in the kind of the military side, I had a deployment where I was overseas doing a lot of the counseling work and realized that I wanted to expand my horizons, especially in the therapeutic space, which led me to apply to, USU and a couple other places, but USU is where I got in. And so happy to be here because, I really see this as furthering myself as being able to, support and provide care for our servicemen and women and their families in this role, and being able to do that, similar to what I was doing before, but obviously with a much different lens. So
yeah,
that's really cool. That's a really cool journey.
I don't think we acknowledge as often, at least on the podcast, but in general, a lot of the counseling work the chaplains do in the military. So appreciate and thank you for that work, but also really exciting to have you kind of joining psychology as well. Annie, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a First Lieutenant Annie McConnon. I am a rising fourth year at USIS, which is terrifying, but also very exciting. So, but yeah, like John Ray, I am in the Laboratory of Cognitive Interventions with Dr. Waters as well. And just a little bit on how I got here. I played soccer in college, wanted to go into sports psychology. And so I actually pursued a master's in sports psych at Boston University. And while I was there, ended up doing a 10-week stint at West Point in the Center for Enhanced Performance. So I went down to West Point and lived there for 10 weeks and worked with the new cadets at basic training. And it was there when I decided, okay, enough with the sports psych. I'm going to go with tactical populations. And so one of my mentors there told me to apply to USIS. And so that's really how I ended up here. And unlike other PhD programs, when you apply to USIS, you just get kind of placed in a lab. It's not like other programs where you apply to a mentor. And so I never even touched AI. I never even thought twice about AI until I set foot at USIS and got introduced to Dr. Waters. And so, I mean, there's gonna be a common theme throughout this, but, like, his, like, enthusiasm about AI and his curiosity is really contagious, and that's quite literally how I ended up here, like, talking with him about the integration of AI in soccer, and how that it's changing
Interesting.
the field of professional soccer, and so those, like, initial conversations that we had when I started at the school is really what kinda sparked my curiosity and, "Okay, how are we thinking about this in the field of clinical psychology? Like, how is this impacting psychology in similar ways or different ways it's impacting, like, the sport of soccer?" And so, yeah,
Huh,
that's how I ended up here and talking about AI.
that's so
That's really
cool.
cool.
So
Mm.
much crossover. I was just before we move into AI, so much crossover there with performance psychology, with in the athlete and sport arena, and in
Right.
obviously the military arena. So it's really cool you're bringing that perspective in, and the AI crossover as well.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, it is a very common trend with our students. I feel like in our lab, but similar to Annie, like I wasn't necessarily interested in artificial intelligence coming in. I was before coming to USIS. I was working at a lab elsewhere, looking at substance use, and that's what Dr. Waters was specifically interested in before. And I met with him while he was on sabbatical in London, and his British accent obviously is very
Mm.
swaying as well, but his enthusiasm about artificial intelligence, I mean, like after that, 30-minute just brief interaction with him, I was like, this is where I want to end up. This is what I want to study, because it was just so enthusiastic, so interesting,
Mhm.
and the different possibilities, right? Of especially applicable, the applicability of such a technology within clinical practice was just such a fascinating concept to me, which is kind of well, here we are. So both of us kind of fell on that same kind of pathway and trajectory.
Well, so that's a really great segue into like kind of the question I wanted to ask to kick us off here a little bit. We've had a couple of episodes, couple of guests on talking about AI in the work of psychology, and mostly in terms of like ethics, right? Like what are the things we should not do, and kind of leave AI alone for these kinds of things. What are the things that AI is really well suited for? But when we're talking about AI in clinical care, whether it's in Dr. Waters' lab and the research that's being done there, and your own research, which we'll talk about a little bit, like what kinds of AI use cases are we talking about that we're getting excited about, that are ones that you're kind of checking out here about, as we'll talk about later, kind of people's perceptions of it, and appropriateness, and that. So what kind of use cases do you mean when you say AI here?
Sure. I mean, and this is something I think as we are even kind of doing this research and talking about it, right, it's really important to kind of put those parameters and those definitions
Yeah.
about what we're talking about. Because I'll be honest, in that kind of initial conversation with Dr. Waters, when I was coming into the program, really we were kind of at this, I think we were at ChatGPT 3 at that point, right? And we were really seeing some of this immersion of these really sophisticated, specifically kind of these generative AI systems. But what I was really learning in that conversation is that artificial intelligence has been applied, especially in the medical realm, for so long, right?
Mhm.
We've been utilizing machine learning algorithms, that these predictive models that are kind of helping us make diagnostic decisions for a long time. We've been utilizing natural language processing to build our notes and transcribe things in a way that's taking away some of that human error, right? So when we're talking about some of these use cases, I think the conversation that a lot of people have, when this kind of topic comes up, a lot of the first thoughts are, oh, is ChatGPT going to be my therapist, right? Is
Right.
Mhm.
ChatGPT going to replace me as a therapist? But it's not necessarily the extent of what we're talking about, because in the idea of artificial intelligence and these neural networks that are building these very sophisticated machines, there is a lot of different possibilities that is outside of that realm of the generative AI that can be really, really helpful. And again, if you look at some, recent studies, especially around, suicide prediction, risk assessment, right? Machine learning algorithms are scoring well above human clinicians, just in the terms of being able to be better predictors of things. But there are a lot of, in terms of new emerging case examples of just case how these things are being utilized in clinic and everyday practice, is that these things are emerging on the kind of the free market, right? There are a lot of chatbot based LLM, large language model based therapy chatbots that are helping people, and I think, Annie and I have talked about this individually, but we're even seeing, anecdotally, like people that are coming in for therapy now are saying, well, I talked to my chatbot therapist. I talked to ChatGPT about these things, right? And so I think as we're talking about it, it's not just the case examples of how practitioners and therapists are using these in the clinic, but I think it's also how the client and the patient are utilizing these things outside of the therapy space as well.
Right.
So I don't know if that provides a huge overlapping or big picture umbrella of those case examples, but
Well, it's definitely interesting. I'm glad you bring that up because, a lot of times our previous conversations, at least on this podcast, have been like, speaking of how clinicians can be using,
Mhm.
AI tools, whether it, like you said, trying kind of transcribing sessions or even generating, some worksheets on a couple of things, or, generate, like in the case of Jenna and I are both prolonged exposure therapy instructors and consultants. So, one example we come up with all the time is maybe it can help us generate some in vivo exposure exercises for a particular client. Certainly those kinds of applications are really, like you said, are kind of on the therapist side, the clinician side. We don't talk a lot about the fact, or we haven't talked a lot about the fact
Mhm.
that our clients are using AI tools all the time and are coming in with that experience, whether that is talking to a chatbot as though it is a therapist, or whether it's using various tools in other ways. Like regardless of what the clinician thinks about AI, we're still contending with it. We're still encountering it because our clients are definitely encountering AI and they're bringing that with them.
Yeah, and something else that I'm seeing also in practicum, but also on the research side of things is how research participants are utilizing AI and how that's influencing interventions we're trying to study. So, as an example, I recently worked on a imagery intervention where with military musicians, where we were coaching professional military musicians through developing their own imagery script through over the course of 3 sessions, over the course of 4 weeks. So they do performance one, no imagery. Teach them how to write their own imagery script. They'd write their own script, rehearse it, measure reductions in or changes in cognitive and somatic anxiety and confidence at performance time point two. And part of the intervention is they have the opportunity to get feedback on their scripts. And a couple of the scripts I received were written by AI. And so
Interesting.
I'm like curious about like how is that in and of itself influencing the efficacy of the intervention that we're
Right.
trying to study to see if it works. So just something that's like
yeah.
happening real time in my like research life, but that's also relevant. Just how it's
Like another
influencing the
example of
intervention.
AI doing our homework for us, right?
Right, right.
I
Well,
Yeah.
and that's fascinating because I think one of the, as Kevin and I were chatting before, and again, we've talked about AI before, we always want to sort of bring home to our listener, like, why should I care, right? Like, okay, these people are talking about AI, why should I care? Why does this impact my practice? And I think one of the things going back to whether it's in research or in your clinical setting, we don't assess for it, right? Like we don't typically ask about it. We've had some
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
fascinating guests on lately about gambling disorder, and we had one on behavioral disorders and kind of addictions to technology and things like that. And we always ask about, are you using alcohol? Do you use tobacco? Do you go exercise every day? Run me through a typical day. But I feel like a lot of providers aren't trained in asking great questions about if you're using, how are you using AI to know things like that? What are you using it for? Is that to get therapy? But are there things that we're doing together where you're implementing it so that I can make sure that I'm understanding that and we can
Yeah.
have checks and balances in place in case things go. So that's fascinating. That is there any indication that there's a difference between if somebody wrote it out themselves versus if AI assisted is that I'm sure that would be hard to look at, but
Yeah, I don't know the answer to
yeah,
that, honestly, but I can tell you from our sample, there wasn't a ton of movement on the anxiety that we were looking for. So,
shucks.
it just like got me thinking about like how the interaction with the technology is impacting the usefulness or the
Yeah,
effectiveness of the imagery script when it's supposed to be such
right.
a personal thing.
But maybe that's the reason, right? Like, what if that was controlled for maybe the ones who wrote it?
Right.
So that's interesting. Huh.
Yeah, that
Right.
was
Jenna,
gonna
you're
be my question. Like we worried, I don't know, but I've worried about that impact on like my kids and the homework that they do for school. If they're having Chat GPT, for example, not just one of them out there, but if they're having one of these chatbots write their assignments for them, they're not having the opportunity to learn or have the desired outcome of that exercise, right? Than if they were writing it from scratch. And similarly, I've certainly heard those same arguments for college as well. College papers, college assignments, and it really does cross over a bit into the therapeutic work we do as well, right? Where in many of our interventions, we're assigning homework or practice exercises between sessions. If we are not even asking or aware of whether they're utilizing these tools to get those done, we don't know what the impact is and whether it's diluting
Right.
the intended
Or
outcome
strengthening.
or strengthening it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, Jenna, your question and Kevin, your points there. I think there's some interesting study, especially around supportive of a lot of what we're looking at, especially with the AI, and what I'm specifically looking at is AI and clinical expertise, the ability for AI tools to either mimic human expertise or enhance it. And there's a lot of study, especially in the expertise world, where like chess is kind of the gold standard. And again, if you talk to Dr. Waters at least for 10 minutes, you're going to talk about chess in some form or fashion. So I have to say all of my understanding of expertise in chess is from Dr. Waters. But there is there's research and study out there that's showing these chess players, especially professional grandmaster level chess players, who utilize artificial intelligence based systems to improve their chess skills,
Hmm.
are outperforming those chess players that are not using artificial intelligence systems, right?
Interesting.
Now, of course, in that example, those chess players are not saying, okay, AI, make the move for me, right? Like you're saying, if a student takes ChatGPT, write this essay for me and copy paste. Um, but I think as we're talking about it in a clinical space, right? Clinical expertise gets so messy. There's so many domains. There's a lot of nuance around it, right? It's not a, hey, if I do this therapeutic, skill or intervention in session, then that person's going to get better. Like if I do chess, right? Like if I take a person's queen, like that's a huge win. And so, the question I kind of have as we're kind of approaching this is, even if we're utilizing artificial intelligence in that way, right? If a client is using it to help them with, with homework that's assigned between sessions, or if they're utilizing artificial intelligence to, help them process their emotions after a session, or if a clinician is utilizing it to like, hey, let me practice on like give ChatGPT a specific scenario and vignette, let me work through some of my clinical skills with this LLM. Is it doing the same thing as some of these other domains of expertise that we're seeing? And I think
Right.
what we're finding, at least in the research, is that the research is just not there right now. We haven't really done those replicable studies in our domain, which is kind of what has propelled us to really try and do some deeper dives in this and see kind of what are those mechanisms that are in play, and are these systems really going to help us in a similar way, or are they stifling the work that we're doing?
I love that because what you're saying, if I could distill it down to just a couplet maybe, is that it's really not whether or not you're using the tools, it's how you're using them, right? Like we
Exactly.
certainly have a lot of evidence suggesting that simulation can be really important for training, for practicing skills, for improving skills. And if an AI tool is helping to provide, for example, simulation scenarios where somebody can be practicing skills and getting feedback, that can be really useful. If they're having the artificial intelligence do the assignment for them where they're not thinking and they're not reflecting and not receiving feedback, it's a whole different ballgame. And I don't mean to turn it into like this dichotomy, but how they're using it is a different question than whether they're using it or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you started to describe, John Ray, what you all are doing, but can you describe the studies that you are engaged, the research you're engaged with at USU in this lab?
Yeah, sure. Well, I may kick it over to Annie first, because this all really kind of started with a seminal paper. I probably shouldn't say that because it's still out. We just published it.
It's
but a
outdated at this
phenomenalist.
point.
Yeah, right, that one too. But Annie kind of started, in her first year, kind of looking at some of the research questions was specifically around, as we are, uniformed services, we are, military, folks doing this work as well. Kind of that question of how is artificial intelligence being used in clinical psychology or therapy settings in a military context? And so Annie really kind of spearheaded this, paper looking at a narrative review of those different use cases. So Annie, I don't want to steal your thunder because again, you were the primary author there, but
Yeah, so we really just did a narrative review comparing like how AI is being utilized in the civilian sector versus the military behavioral health system. So really in the civilian sector, it came out to these like 6 domains that AI is being used. So to the clinical case uses like documentation, assessment, prognosis, diagnosis, um, education and training, and intervention. And so within those 6 domains, we said, okay, how is the military behavioral health system using AI within these domains? There are very, very few papers, and honestly, they're outdated at this point. And we'll put the link to our paper in
Great.
the
The show notes.
description so that you can see it. But we wrote it the lab worked on it 2023, 2024, and it didn't actually hit the print. It's in military medicine. It didn't actually hit print until early 2025. And so at this point, like we're going into the fall of 2026, it's an outdated paper. But it really, machine learning to predict things. So like predicting medication adherence, for example, predict suicide. Like those are really the main usage cases in the military behavioral health system for active
Yeah.
duty. So we're really looking at active duty samples. But from that paper, there's a lot of gaps in where the military behavioral health system isn't using AI. So specifically for intervention specifically, I mean, this has probably changed, but for clinical documentation, like I know the VA is piloting some ways to help document using AI. But really that intervention piece. And then it became a question of, okay, well, why? Like why aren't we advancing as rapidly as the civilian sector is? And so that kind of led to John Ray's study on attitudes and really examining how providers and patients are thinking and thinking about AI in psychotherapy and clinical psychology.
that's exactly, from Annie's, deep research and diving into these, the literature, it kind of led us to that piece of right, kind of what we've talked about up front here, where AI it's here, right? People are using it regardless of our opinions on it. But I think, compared to other sectors that, artificial intelligence is being pushed at us at every point in some cases, right? Like I can't go to a website without them having a, chatbot for me to talk to now. Um, but what we were finding is that in terms of related to attitudes, both from clients and practitioners related to artificial intelligence use, it was mainly directed towards the medical field, right? And we're talking more general practice medicine, more specific areas, specialty areas of medicine, but very little in regards to kind of parsing that out for mental health space and specifically psychotherapy. And additionally, what we were kind of seeing is that the studies that were out there, if they were measuring any types of attitudes towards AI use in mental health care, it was very general and very broad, right? There was questions like, do you like, are you okay with AI in healthcare? Yes or no, right? Do you think it helps more than hurts, right? So very
Right.
limiting in those perspectives. And so we wanted to really kind of get at, as Annie's domains as she was looking at and finding between the civilian and military sector, um, how is AI's application in different areas of clinical expertise? How is that being accepted or not between clients and practitioners? And so what we tried to do is kind of, we piled a large survey together to try and get at this, but we created a survey instrument based on the American Psychological Association's, the APA's competency domains, and there are 6 of those as well. And so we tried to create questions related to the AI's application in those 6 domains and trying to compare and contrast, client and practitioner perspectives to try and really understand, right? Again, it's not necessarily the if AI is being used because we know it is in
Right.
both,
Right.
again, from clients and providers, but what are the attitudes towards the way that it's being used, and what are the concerns related to those applications of it?
And it sounds like that is such an important thing to further understand to perhaps put to rest some misconceptions or myths or fears that providers have that aren't actually based in anything related to patient perspectives or vice versa, because I can imagine, for example, a provider thinking like, if somebody sees me using AI to help you know scribe or do that, it's going to kind of not play out well for me, or maybe a client actually loves that because the provider's like really paying attention, and it kind of takes a little of that lift off of them. So that's is that one intention, is to kind of compare and contrast what like providers and clients both think, but then how those actually go together, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, kind of our main objective with the study and the research that we're doing right now is, specifically comparing those two groups and seeing how clients and providers, differ on those different applications, but also providing some, right, the kind of the what behind, or the, excuse me, the why behind the what's of, right,
Hmm.
like, this is the why, individuals are having concerns in this application versus
Yeah.
this, and hopefully, again, larger hopes, of course, but the idea is that the findings that we get is going to be able to inform our larger community, right? Based on especially training around AI. How are we training our providers to approach AI, right? Are we training our providers to approach
Yeah.
AI, or how are we are,
Absolutely.
taking it on, right? And being able to take those different aspects, I think, can help us understand, okay, these are the areas that our providers either feel, right, AI application is good, or useful, and these are areas that, our providers are saying it's not so helpful, and maybe there are new emerging systems that are out there that may be helpful in there, but if we are, having those more negative attitudes in those specific applications, maybe there
Yeah.
is more training we need to have, more understanding about what these systems do and what they are, and really be able to kind of, again, parse out a little bit of, right, what is the exact areas, that our clients and our providers are A, using it, B, and how they feel about it, right? So
I love that you said that too, because in some ways it's not just, whether or not people are using it in those various domains or what their understanding of it is, but there could be an awful lot of biases, uninformed biases,
Right.
yes, yeah.
fears that are driving use or not use of various, AI tools in various domains. And so part of that can help reveal a bit too of like where have folks been perhaps misinformed, or are
And
maybe they have very legitimate fears that not so long ago, I mean, the pace of this moves so quickly,
Right.
right? But like
yeah,
not so long ago, this was a very legitimate, very big concern. We all had to be very thoughtful and watchful for it. And in the meantime, maybe some of these issues have actually been resolved, or they're not nearly as dangerous and or risky that as they were a few years ago. And just even keeping pace with that, or the inability to keep pace with the ever evolving nature of that could be what's driving some of these biases too. It'd be
yeah,
fascinating to find out what folks actually think.
Yeah,
yeah,
Annie and John Ray, I hate to tell you this, but your paper you haven't written yet is already outdated.
yeah.
Yeah,
You're right. You're
it
absolutely right.
is.
Yeah,
It is.
I was gonna not say that because,
That's tough. That it's constantly changing. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
it's a big
Yeah.
possibility that when this podcast comes out, everything we've talked about is outdated, right?
Right.
Because
absolutely.
A
it's
few
just
weeks
moving
away.
so quickly. Yeah, it's
So
moving so quickly. I
fast.
mean, there is a new article, a new news
Yeah.
outlet, like there's a news story every week that literally we look at, in lab and together, and we talk about it, because it's just changing so
All
rapidly.
the time.
And it's changed the way that we've approached this, I think, just, out of academic curiosity, because how do you keep up? And then I think
Right.
that also
Yeah.
kind of talks
Your
to, right, like,
dissertation's never going to get done. You guys are just
No.
never. It's just that paragraph where you're summarizing the research. It's going to go
yeah.
on and on.
So
But
Jenna
if you apply
specializes in
this,
positive psychology,
Positive
if you couldn't
psychology.
tell.
got
Yeah.
it, got it.
You guys are screwed.
Yeah, very positive. I feel very good right now about my dissertation. It's really not. I'm not having
Aren't
an
you glad you
existential
Do
came?
you need me
crisis,
on your
as we think
committee? Are you
about.
looking for another member? Because I'm available. I'm here for
It's
you,
it's
John
really
Ray.
interesting as we're talking about this, right? Because, as researchers, I'm feeling that exact thing of, like,
Yeah.
I'm not up to date. I can't keep
Yeah.
up with the literature that's coming
Yeah.
out. But when you apply that to our providers, right? And especially if you think about the military side, our military
Sure.
providers are still, like, I think the last numbers I saw from the VA, was about 60% are actually billeted positions. So we are sitting at a 40% deficit. Again, this is the last numbers I did, so this may also be outdated. But we have a huge strain on our providers that
Yeah.
there are more client demands than there are providers in the current space. And I think that's true across the board.
Yeah.
And now you're asking our providers to do more. You're also asking them to stay up to date with the most recent evidence-based treatments, do these continuing education programs, right? Like doing all these extra certifications. But now you're also asking them to know what AI is capable of. It's a huge
Yeah.
ask, and
And that it
it's very
changes
overwhelming.
constantly. I mean, I was gonna say,
Changes
you said
constantly.
that you're feeling that pressure, right? Of maybe I don't
Mhm.
not keeping up with it, and you're probably one of the few. You and Anna, you're probably two of the few people that are keeping up with it more than just about anybody else because you're reading these articles on a weekly basis. You're seeing what's coming out and what's updated, and the average provider probably isn't. I mean, I can't imagine any of them are because, like you said, there's a lot
Right,
to do.
right.
There's a lot of work,
It's a
and
lot
so
to do.
it's hard to keep up with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if any providers are interested in participating in my dissertation study, I'm doing a qualitative investigation on provider attitudes. So we're specifically looking at the nuances underneath John Ray's research. So how are providers conceptualizing the integration of AI into psychotherapy, specifically focusing on the therapeutic relationship? Because we are seeing symptom reductions with these chatbots, with these large language models. Like there are depression, anxiety symptom reductions, but we're also seeing concerns from providers about things like ethics, things like
Yeah.
data security, and things
Yeah.
like the therapeutic relationship. And so I'm really interested in looking at how are people thinking about these things, and providers at different levels. So master's level, PhD level clinicians, and across therapeutic orientations.
Mm,
Something that I'm seeing is there's a lot more willingness for CBT based providers than for psychodynamic providers, for example.
interesting.
And so I'm really curious to hear from providers about how you all are conceptualizing. How are you using the tools? How are you thinking about how it's going to impact specifically the therapeutic relationship and behavior change?
So we will, and I just had one quick question. Is that across military and non-military?
Yeah, civilian, military, any licensed provider.
Okay.
And I'll put out, I can put more information in the what is it?
The
I
show
keep
notes.
wanting to
We'll
say the
include the
bio.
link
My
to the
link's in the
studies.
bio.
That's
It's
on
ring that
Instagram.
bell, hit
In the
subscribe.
show
I
notes.
gotta say
Right,
all
exactly.
those buzzwords.
Like,
Yeah.
follow, all the
Yeah,
things.
like,
Yeah.
follow. Yeah.
So we'll be able to link both of the studies.
That's great. Yeah, and similarly, and to bring my my old chaplain hat, we're even including pastoral counselors in that
Great.
serve that population as well, right? I mean, again, a little biased from my own personal experience, but counseling was such a huge part of my role as a chaplain.
Yeah.
And so, right, like, how are these different people in different domains, different disciplines? I think it's really fascinating to compare and contrast, not to continue the right, like, oh, this domain, this discipline's better than the other, and keep up those rivalries. But I think that each approach and each therapeutic lens, right, is very valuable in that conversation, and how we're thinking about everything right now.
So let me just clarify for our listeners that they could participate in both of your studies. Like they're ongoing right now. Is that right?
That is great.
And survey based. So we'll put the information for how you can participate.
Callers are standing by to sign you up.
That's right.
That's right.
So John raises a survey link, and then mine will
Yep.
be email me, and then we can enroll you in the study.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah, we're still working on mine study's not live yet.
So I mean, this then is a nice segue, I think, then too, because I'm so tempted to say, well, what are you finding? And I know I got to be careful because you don't want to, you don't want
That'll
to
be our
bias the
follow-up episode.
There'll be follow-up.
Yeah,
You don't want to
yeah.
bias your outcome by,
Right.
telling
Exactly.
folks who might already be doing it. So let me ask it to you this way. I'm going to ask it a different question instead of that. And that is, we started off by you telling us how you kind of got involved in this, like what got you into looking into AI, Dr. Waters' lab being a thing that apparently neither of you were anticipating, but it was just really an important pivot point, I think, when you got involved there. Our theme this season has been talking about impactful moments, talking about those experiences that somebody has that maybe has a pivot in the work they do. It could be professional, it could be personal, it could be a pivot positive. It doesn't have to be, but we're really looking for what are those really human moments that impact us as people. And I wonder if each of you would share your impactful moment with us. Like, what was that time, that moment where things shifted a bit for you.
Yeah, so I just wrapped up my practicum year at the United States Naval Academy. I was working in the Midshipman Development Center, which is the Naval Academy's version of college counseling. And so my master's at BU, I'd worked in an outpatient substance use clinic. When I came to USIS, I was doing assessment at GW. So kind of had a pretty, a bunch of different experiences. I've never worked in a college counseling center before. My training has primarily been in CBT, and I was working under an interpersonal supervisor this year. And so I think last year, going through all of this data and reading all this research about how promising AI is in all of these different domains, but specifically focused on like symptom reduction. Like we're seeing that people's symptoms were getting better and the chatbots were demonstrating empathy. I'm like, that's so cool. But after taking a year and spending the year under supervision of someone with a more psychodynamic perspective and really getting to learn more about the therapeutic relationship, I'm really starting to see gaps and notice gaps and take a little bit
Yeah.
more of a like a step back, like, wait a second, let me slow down and actually see what this means and see what the ultimate goal is for integration of AI and psychotherapy. Because from my point of view, I think there's different goals here. Like if there's stabilization and you're trying to get someone stable in a crisis moment, like the friend chatbot that was deployed in Ukraine and had really great impacts for people who were in crisis.
Yeah.
Awesome. Like that's really effective. That's really useful. Short-term symptom reduction. Awesome. Like we're seeing really positive things with that. In terms of like long-term behavior change, is this is are we at a point where this is going to enact change? And I think that's has been really that like pivotal moment for me is getting to learn more as a student trainee about the therapeutic relationship and realizing those gaps, like the setting. Like there's no setting if you're doing therapy with a chatbot. Like
Right.
you're using a lot of clinically relevant data. That
Right.
simply comes from just sitting in the room with someone and
Right.
observing them interpersonally and the absence of transference. Again, like the clinically relevant data that comes from experiencing transference and countertransference and processing it, and using that as an intervention to have a corrective emotional experience. Like there's really the loss of those elements that are really foundational to psychotherapy. So that's really got me thinking and has gotten me really exciting and has been like a real like what was the term used? Impactful moment for me where
Yeah.
I'm taking a step back and I'm saying, okay, like I need to flip the script and really dive a little bit deeper and beyond symptom reduction and into those more deeper aspects of psychotherapy that I think might be getting kind of pushed aside because we're seeing promising results.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
So not a replacement yet for that.
Mhm.
I say
Yeah.
yet in quotes, like I don't know. If there's are we gonna get there? I don't know. But
Yeah.
right
Who
now,
knows?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
who
I agree
knows?
with you. There's some pieces missing.
I really
Yeah.
like that, Annie. That's a great impactful moment.
Agreed.
All right. So I talked to Amy about this before because I was like, I have two impactful moments, and I
You
was trying
only
to figure
get
out which
one,
one
John
I was.
Ray. You get one. One
I
per
only
person.
get one. I only get one.
No, all right, you can have two if they're
Okay. All right. I appreciate it. I will try again. Speaking back, I was a Baptist preacher in my past life, so I'll try and keep it brief because we know that.
Oh boy.
So my first impactful moment, I think, that I just have to share is, as I was growing up, small, little John Ray. I was born very rural Tennessee, and my granny was my first introduction to really technology. My granny was a very cool granny. I gotta say that out loud. She was always playing video games. She had,
Wow.
I'm gonna date myself, but she had a Pal Talk group that she played music. It was called Tennessee Tweez Music Room, and I would sit hours beside her as I'd watch her engage with these different technologies. And so my love for technology really came from that just in influential, impactful moments with my granny who cared so deeply about what she did and the people that were around her. And so I still take her, she passed away, a while ago. I'm gonna try not to cry because I will when I'm talking about her. But I constantly think about what I'm doing now and my interest in technology still stems from her. And so anything that I'm
Wow.
doing, I have to ask the question, right? Am I making my granny proud? Am I doing something that would make her proud? And so,
What
sorry,
would Granny do? You have a different bracelet.
exactly.
WWGD.
GW. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. Right. And am I doing something to make her proud? And I think she probably wouldn't understand necessarily, especially where we are now. But I think she would be very proud. And so that's kind of that
That's
first
cool.
impactful moment of why I keep being driven by these technology and these new advances. But I think especially kind of where I am now in a psychology program, the other piece of that is, so I went overseas with the Army in 2022, and as part of that, I was the one chaplain for about 200 plus soldiers. And at one point, I even got double tasked to be a theater gateway chaplain for one of the fobs we were setting up as well. And so I was seeing just this huge influx of people, and people, our service members that were in very austere environments, that hadn't seen a chaplain, hadn't seen a mental health professional. They hadn't seen a clinical psychologist, hadn't seen a social worker for months,
Yeah.
out of their very difficult, very long tours they were overseas. And as I was trying to do this work, I was just feeling so overwhelmed. I mean, the compassion fatigue was just so real where, you know, I joked, but we were doing 24-hour ops. And every time we would be in a commander's update brief, and they'd be like, all right, who's on the chaplain's team for the 24 hours ops? And I'd be, all right, well, day team is me and night team is me. Right. And so
Sheesh.
there were like that fatigue was very real.
Yeah.
And I just think about, especially as we're talking about these potential use cases for artificial intelligence to provide some at least crisis intervention, some form of support that these folks, that I was serving did not have and didn't have for months at a time. Right. Like if this is a possibility of something that we can research, that we can make better, that we can improve, and we can provide some more support for both our clinicians that are feeling that compassion fatigue, like I was, as well as right, like something that can be useful and not harmful. Again, talking about those potential
Right.
concerns that are there,
Yeah.
right? That it is important to think about. But if there's a way that we can make that better, that body of research, that applicability, that practical, use of it in a way that is beneficial to both our clients and our providers. I think that's really is what keeps driving me to look and see how we can make this better.
Jenna Ray, I'm really glad I said you should tell both of those because I
Yes.
wouldn't want to have missed either one of those. So yeah, that care extender piece of it in especially places and times when resources are so thin.
I appreciate you sharing that too, because I swear, like I feel like there's a part of me that knows your granny and loves her a bunch.
I
Just
know.
thank you for sharing that. That's awesome, and thank you, Annie,
Granny's
for
got to
sharing
make
yours
it into the
too.
title, we decided.
Yes, that's right.
That's great. Yeah, Granny's artificial intelligence is maybe we can see
Yeah.
copyright.
You might never get her off the computer today. That might be the problem. Granny, you've had your
Yeah,
screen
that's right.
time.
That's right.
Put your
That's right.
tablet down. Those are fantastic.
Yes.
And I think it's so cool. One of our other seasons, we've talked about people's paths and kind of came to the understanding that none of us had a straight path, right? Like all of us, any of my research or some of my clinical things or some of the things I've done at CDP, I never would have picked. They weren't necessarily even where I thought I'd be, but how they just enriched and kind of informed me as a provider and a person and all those things. So you've continued that theme of the winding path, or maybe sort of taking advantage of opportunities, and the unexpected can be fulfilling in ways you never imagined. So that's really cool.
Tobler's law comes back again.
There we
I'm just
go.
saying.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
do end our episodes, and I am mindful of the time, with something we call actionable intel. And so these are things that we would want providers who are listening, what's something that they can do today, tomorrow, to, improve their practice, impact, what
Mm.
they're doing in the work that they're doing.
Incoming actionable intel.
Obviously, we know number one is be part of the survey and follow up and be part of the research, be part of the findings.
Yes.
Do you have any other, thoughts about what you would tell providers to do tomorrow?
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a few resources, and Annie, jump in if I'm missing any here. But I think one resource that I personally have used and have found extremely useful is a Sentio, Sentio University out in California. They're a master's marriage and family therapy, and they are not paying us. This is just a resource that they put out, and it's completely for free. But they have courses. They have a AI and mental health course that is completely free. It is asynchronous, so it is, I
That's
think,
cool.
4, if I'm not mistaken, 4 segments of AI course that's being taught there. They have PowerPoint slides along with handouts, along with a lot of other resources that are there, and they specifically talk a lot about kind of the term they use is clinical brainstorming. So the way that clinicians can utilize specifically large language models like a ChatGPT or Gemini, right, in safe ways as well. So there's ethical
Yeah.
practices, reiterating that, but ways that they can use these tools to build their deliberate practice, build some structured practice in what they're doing to really help them build those therapeutic skills before they're face to face with a client. So that's one I think is super helpful. Again, it's pretty quick too, pretty accessible. Highly recommend.
That's great.
The other one I think that's important. It's a little bit more data driven. So for those data nerds that are out there like me, so Stanford University releases the Stanford AI Index every year. And they just recently published their new one in the spring, but they released data related to general attitudes in all across all domains of artificial intelligence use across multitude of disciplines, domains, practices, etc. One specific area they ask about is healthcare and people's attitudes, and they look at this from a global perspective, so it's not just U.S. based. But I think getting into some of that data can help our providers really kind of get a good feel for how how clients that are coming into their practice may be viewing AI, how they may be using AI, and can really kind of generate at least some of these kind of academic research questions or this this curiosity at least of, okay, this is what some of the data is telling us about how people are feeling and using AI, and this is maybe something I should be looking at in the practice that I'm looking at with our folks.
Huh.
The last one, and I have to because I'm just such a huge nerd, so I got to give out something that's maybe not research based, but just something personal. Two, really, I just think as we're talking about artificial intelligence again, Annie and I talk about it all the time. I feel like Annie's just tired of me talking about AI all the time anyway, but um, you know, there's kind of two dichotomies as we've even alluded to here in our conversation, right? Like AI is going to destroy everything, or AI is going to make everything
Right.
of our lives that much easier.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's two science fiction, I think, genres that really kind of hit this. And Dune, if anyone is a Dune head that's listening, there's the Butlerian Jihad, where literally they fought against the rising machines that try to take out the human race. So I just think it's, again, as we're thinking about these two dichotomies, it's just fun to kind of get that science fiction and understanding of it. But also the other side of that is Star Trek. So the nav deck, right, is the wonderful AI that does everything for you, right? It even creates this lovely food from whatever waste is being had on the Enterprise. But right, I do think, and this is again me just being a nerd, but getting involved in some of these science fiction works that include artificial intelligence kind of helps us just understand where our place is amongst this kind of fictional writing, right? And it kind of helps us. I don't know. It grounds me at least, right? Like we don't have these machines that are rising up to get us just yet, but it's it does help kind of ground me at least of, all right, these are what some really wonderful creative minds, have thought about, machines and robots
Explored a
and
bit.
artificial
Yeah.
intelligence. But it kind of helps me understand, okay, this is where I am in our moment, and this is kind of what we're seeing, and just kind of gives me a really interesting perspective, I think. So,
Kevin, you may have just met your match.
I seriously am
I
nerding
mean,
out right now, and I'm
honestly,
loving
I
this.
have never seen anyone, John Ray, I mean this with affection, outdork Kevin, and you may have just done it. And
We
I
might just have to go
saw
to lunch.
like his
I'm just
eyes
saying.
got a
yeah,
little glossy, and like, he might have welled up that back, when you were talking about that comparison a little
love
bit.
it, love it. Well, I held back on my Dune. I just wrote literally for a class. I wrote a case conceptualization about a Dune character and went way too in depth about the lore. So I'm
Oh
sure
gosh,
my professors did not,
You
look
guys
that up,
maybe
but
maybe just have like coffee
this
once
is
a
my
week or
people.
something. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can get it out in
Yeah.
a safe space, and Annie and I don't have to be a part of that. This would be good.
They're gonna have a separate episode without us.
Yeah.
We're not gonna
we
know
just
about
talked
it.
about the Butlerian Jihad and what that looks like.
Yeah. That'll be
Hey,
like a
we could have
3-4 hour
a
episode.
We'll
we
add
could
that
have a
with
Star
Granny. Yeah.
Trek episode. They have therapists on this on the USS Enterprise. So
Yep.
just saying.
That's
Annie, is there anything non-Star Trek related that you would like to add?
Yeah, and I don't have any Star Trek, so I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Dr. Holloway, but, yeah, I will
I'll
just
give
say,
it a
like,
pass.
continued education, I think, is great to just
Mhm.
inform yourself as a provider on how to like effectively and ethically use AI, but also I think understanding how AI is impacting patients is becoming just as relevant as how things like sleep and exercise and other things are impacting patients' mental health as well. And so I think that like those continued education resources that John Ray referenced um, are awesome, and just continuing to
Yeah.
be curious about it.
Well, and in that vein, I was going to add one, if I may, with the be curious about it. I think that ask about it, asking about it with your clients.
Right.
Have you ever used AI for mental health stuff? How have you used it? What did you ask? What were you curious about? What did it say? And I'm even thinking, if you're going, we talk a lot about PE Coach 2, an app. And there
Mhm.
used to be, now I feel like all providers are a little more app savvy, but there was like adopters and non-adopt, right? Like people that liked the app or they never wanted to use the app. But the problem was it was the patient that we had to, like, if the patient
Right.
is an app happy person, this is a resource for them. So as a provider, you need to understand the app so that you can use it with your client. And I think
Absolutely.
similarly, if you're a provider who really sort of doesn't like AI, that's awesome. And people have all sorts of reasons why they don't. But you need to familiarize yourself a little bit to know what's out there. What
That's right.
Yeah.
what does that experience look like? What kind of information comes from that so you can have a good conversation with your client? Additionally, I'm thinking if I were a provider, if I was, I don't see clients now, but if I was doing PE and we were working on in vivo and we got stuck, I would want to, if we were going to use AI, do it together and say, like, what would
Right.
you ask?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gave this. Let's evaluate that. So you're kind of guiding that process and
Kind of
you're
modeling
working
a good,
with
useful
it
use
together,
of. Yeah.
Yeah.
modeling,
Yeah.
Yeah.
good use of AI versus, asking questions that are really problematic. So that's my addition. So, well, this was really delightful.
Really was. Really appreciate you both coming. Thank you
Yeah.
Thank you
for
for
sharing
having
your
us.
research with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy. Thanks for having us on again. I know, Kevin, I was pestering you about a lot of things related to the research, and
No,
so
that's
this
all
was just
right.
one of those. But I really appreciate it just to have a little bit of a different, conversation related to some of the research we're doing, because I think it gets very
Oh,
heady, it gets very academic sometimes, and just kind of talking about, like, again, the practical use of it is very, it's very fulfilling for me too. So
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. I mean, that's what we're all about is, kind of practical application and how we can make the work that we do, especially in evidence-based psychotherapies, even better, more effective, better outcomes. And this is all part of it. Like I mentioned Tobler's Law earlier, right? Everything is related to everything else. So
and you
we're
might even
just
call it practical for your practice, really,
something like
with what we
that.
talk about.
maybe, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good name. You should
Yeah.
probably like trademark that or
Yeah.
something. Put it on
Yeah.
a podcast.
Yeah.
I think it's really good.
It just flows right off the tongue. But again, thank you all for being
Yeah.
here with us. Thank you all to our listeners who join us. We'd love to hear from you as well. So we'd love to hear about your impactful moments, or if you've got questions for any of our past guests, or if you have ideas for topics or future guests, please reach out to us. We've got an email address we'll put in the show notes. You can leave us a voicemail on our Speak Pipe. We'll leave the link for that in our show notes as well. Again, we'd love to hear from you and what it is that you're interested in. And until then, stay curious.
And mind your EBPs.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Be sure to subscribe to Practical for Your Practice to be notified when new episodes arrive. Our theme music is Failed Attempts by Nitro, and our administrative assistant is Bree Mercer. This podcast is produced by CDP at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences. The views expressed are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Uniformed Services University, the Department of War, or the U.S. government. In addition, references to any specific companies, products, processes, or services does not necessarily constitute or imply endorsement by the Uniformed Services University, the Department of War, or the U.S. government.